Well, it's a couple of minutes after 6 o'clock here in Texas, so stand by for Muse. And tonight's lesson is called From Apostate to Apostle. From Apostate to Apostle. Isn't it curious how similar those words sound? You have apostate and you have apostle. They sound so much alike, it almost seems like the two words should be related. And in a way they are. If we look at etymology, which is the study of the origin of words, we know that these two words have similar roots. They each contain the exact same prefix, apos, apos, which means off. So apostate comes from the Greek word apostasia, which literally means to stand off. And apostle comes from the Greek apostolos, which literally means to send off. So apostate, stand off. Apostle, send off. So an apostate stands off or defects. He rejects what he formerly confessed as truth. An apostle is sent forth as one to proclaim the truth to which he clings and to represent the one who is sending him. Essentially, an apostle is literally Christ's missionary to the world. So as we explore this story, I want to do so with a question in mind. And the question is this: is it possible to turn your back on Christ and then turn back to Christ? Is it possible to turn your back on Christ and then turn back to Christ? I've dropped enough hints for you probably to have guessed by now that we're talking about Peter. And so I want to break this story into 5 slices. I want to cut this pie into 5 pieces. And we'll look at them tonight. And the first one is, promises are easier made than kept. I want to go to Mark chapter 14, and we're going to start in verse number 27. Mark chapter 14 and verse number 27. On the way, Jesus told them, and he's talking to his disciples who will become apostles. On the way, Jesus told them, all of you will desert me, for the scriptures say, God will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. But after I am raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there. Peter said to him, even if everyone else deserts you, I never will. Now, Peter was always the big talker. He was the one who, he was trigger happy. He was always quick on the trigger. He was quick to jump to Jesus' side, and he was just as quick to jump to conclusions. We read on in verse 30, Jesus replied, I tell you the truth, Peter, this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. You will deny 3 times that you even know me. No! Peter declared emphatically. Even if I have to die with you, I'll never deny you. And all the others vowed the same. And I want to stop right here and say this. Leaders lead. Leaders lead. I believe this in every walk of life. I know that leaders can be taught and leaders can be trained, but I believe that leadership is an innate thing that is in the breast of some. And leaders lead. That's how you know they're leaders. And Peter, by virtue of the power of his personality, was a leader among the disciples. They never elected him their leader, and he never asked to be their leader. He just was. For better or worse, the others often followed Peter's lead. When things started going sideways in Jesus' earthly ministry, Peter was ready for a fight. You better believe he was. In John chapter 18, and I'm going to read the first 10 verses. After saying these things, Jesus crossed the Kidron Valley with his disciples and entered a grove of olive trees. Judas, the betrayer, knew this place because Jesus had often gone there with his disciples. The leading priests and Pharisees had given Judas a contingent of Roman soldiers and temple guards to accompany him, now with blazing torches, lanterns, and weapons. Imagine that. It's a dark night. You know, this is before electricity. It's a dark night, and here comes this mob with blazing torches, lanterns, and weapons. arriving at the peaceful grove where you have taken your rest so many times with your disciples. Jesus fully realized all that was going to happen to him, so he stepped forward to meet them and said, "Who are you looking for?" "Jesus the Nazarene," they replied. "I'm he," Jesus said. Then Simon Peter drew a sword and slashed off the right ear of Malchus, the high priest's slave. But Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back into its sheath. Shall I not drink from the cup of suffering the Father has given to me?" I want to stop and say I don't think Peter was going for the ear. I think he was going to cut his head off, and the guy did this and he got his ear. Peter was ready for the fight. It was not the fear of the fight or even fear of losing his life in a fight. I believe for Peter, it came down to realizing Jesus didn't come to fight. He came to sacrifice. The second slice of our pie tonight is betrayal is a bitter cross to bear. In Luke chapter 22, so things have started sliding downhill. Jesus is now in custody. In Luke chapter 22, then Jesus spoke, verse number 52 is where we'll start. Then Jesus spoke to the leading priests, the captains of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him. "Am I some dangerous revolutionary that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there every day. But this is your moment. This is the time when the power of darkness reigns. I'm giving you this. This is your moment." So they arrested him, led him to the high priest's home, and Peter followed at a distance. And so it starts. That's the first thing that starts to happen. The guards lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat around it, and Peter joined them there. A servant girl noticed him in the firelight and began staring at him. Finally, she said, "This man is one of Jesus' followers." Peter denied it. "Woman," he said, "I don't even know him." After a while, someone else looked at him and said, "You must be one of them." "No, man, I'm not," Peter retorted. About an hour later, someone else insisted, "This must be one of them because he's a Galilean too." But Peter said, "Man, I don't know what you are talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. At that moment, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Suddenly, the Lord's words flashed through Peter's mind. "Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." And Peter left the courtyard, weeping bitterly. Do you not see the seeds of apostasy here? Do you see that this man who had so vociferously professed Jesus as the Christ for 3 years now is vehemently denying that he knows Jesus at all? It was an intensely emotional night for everybody involved. The stress levels were through the roof. The indignities Jesus endured, the injustices, how frustrating it must have been for Peter and the others to helplessly watch people seek to destroy the only truly innocent life. Not just any life, but the life. The only life since Adam and Eve that ever really made a difference in the eternal destiny of humanity. Peter, as a disciple, he reminds me a little bit of a rooster. You know, he's always strutting around, crowing about something. And now, as Peter says, "Listen, man, I don't blankety blank know this Jesus guy," God reaches down and plucks a tail feather, and the rooster starts to crow. So the banny rooster disciple has stopped preaching, and God made a rooster preach to him. Peter's eyes meet Jesus as he hears that rooster crow, and the Bible says that Peter goes out and weeps bitterly. His world was shattered, his faith was tattered, his friend and Savior was beaten and battered. At the moment of truth, when everything went down the way Jesus predicted, Peter crumbled. Third slice, when a leader makes a wrong turn, he takes others with him. I want to go to John chapter 21, verses 1 to 7. Later, Jesus, this is after the crucifixion and the resurrection. After the crucifixion and the resurrection. Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples. The sons of Zebedee are James and John. Simon Peter said, I'm going fishing. We'll come too, they all said. So they went out in the boat, but they caught nothing all night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. They were too far from shore. He called out, fellows, have you caught any fish? No, they replied. Then he said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll get some. So this sounds like somebody that knows, hey, you guys are fishing in the wrong spot. I know if you get on the other side of the boat, that's where they're at. And so they do, as he said. At that point, I guess they're desperate to do anything. They'll try anything. So they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciple Jesus loved, that's how John always describes himself, and this is his gospel. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped down to work, and jumped into the water and headed to shore. Peter was, I believe, still reeling from his denial of Jesus Christ. He was embarrassed and ashamed. Now they had this new reality. You know, we keep hearing a lot today about our new reality. Well, these apostles had a new reality where Jesus, even though he had shown himself to still be alive despite having died, they all watched him die. They all saw him get buried, and now they've seen that he is indeed alive, but he's no longer there. It's not like it used to be. He's not there eating with them, traveling with them, teaching them, laughing with them, weeping with them. He's not there to do life with them. Everything has changed. It's a new reality. So Peter says essentially, look, I've had all of this I can take. I've had enough of this. I'm going to go back to what I know. I'm going back to fishing. That is the one thing I know how to do. Who's with me? Well, actually, Peter never said who's with me because Peter never had to say who's with me. He was a natural leader, and they were all with him. They said, well, if you're going fishing, we're going fishing. If you're not sticking around, we're not sticking around. And so when a leader takes a wrong turn, there's a lot of consequences. So they all went fishing. And it isn't long into that decision to go back to his old ways. Before he ever followed Jesus, he was a fisherman. That's what he was doing when Jesus found him, and that's what he did for a living. It isn't long into that decision that Peter has to face the reality that even a wily fisherman who knows all the best fishing spots and all the latest and greatest techniques, even that fisherman is reliant on the goodness of God for his catch. How frustrating it must have been for this fisherman to find that after having walked in the presence and the power of Jesus Christ, even fishing isn't what it used to be. Thank you for watching part 1 of my sermon from Apostate to Apostle. Watch Instagram and my Facebook page for the release of part 2.